Today is Sunday, November 11th, and this is Celtics Beat on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio-video coverage of the Boston Celtics. I'm Adam Kaufman, and episode 288 featuring the Boston Herald's Mark Murphy is brought to you by LinkedIn. Hurry now to linkedin.com/Celtics and receive $50 off your first job post. That's linkedin.com/Celtics to get $50 off your first job post. Today's show also brought to you by The Athletic. Go to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat to get 40% off your monthly subscription. That's a subscription for less than $3 a month just by going to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. Hello, how are you? I am back. Adam Kaufman here with you, and thanks to Evan Valenti for holding down the fort last couple of weeks while I was fully engulfed in all things baseball, but back at it here with the Celtics, and thanks to Bill Simmons for helping us out with some coverage for this week, and not just the regular game-to-game, actually giving us juicy rumors. That's the stuff that fuels shows, right? I mean, the biggest story of the week, it dropped on Wednesday. Terry Rozier, unhappy with his playing time, and the Celtics will move him soon. That's what the Ringer's Bill Simmons said, and we do know that he's tapped into NBA circles, follows the C's as closely as anyone. Shams Charania, The Athletic, followed that report with the note that 7 teams have been monitoring Rozier's status, most aggressively the Suns, who the Celtics just had that terrific comeback win against, come from behind 22 points to win in overtime. Now, none of this should come as a surprise, most especially to Rozier, of course, with Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward healthy. Marcus Smart re-signed in the offseason. Rozier has touched on that issue of playing time often, going back to the offseason, preseason, and as recently as just the other day. He's always said the right things about his role and just wanting to make an impact, and confronted about the issue, said more of the same pregame in Phoenix on Thursday.
I woke up to the news just like how y'all woke up to the news. I don't know where it came from, but I'm happy to be in this position I'm at. I'm playing on a team that's mentioned to be in the championship, to have a chance to be in the championship, so I'm not really worried about what's being said. Danny knows, and that's why he said what he said. I'm not complaining, and if you know me, I've never been the one to complain about. I would never go to the media or bring out the unhappy thing. I would never do that. And like I said, people that know me know I wouldn't do that. I've never been a selfish type of person, selfish player. You can tell the way I play. I'm all about team, we, and everything. So everything will be all right.
Danny is Danny Ainge, you know that, and as alluded to by Terry, Danny earlier that day was on 98.5 The Sports Hub in Boston, told Toucher and Rich much of the same.
You know, I talked to Terry quite a bit. I haven't heard any of those types of things, so I don't know how reliable any of the sources or rumors are. Terry hasn't shared any of those with me, and I think he would if he were feeling that way. Terry knew going in this year what his situation, what his role was going to be, and he was as excited and enthusiastic as anybody on our team for the upcoming season. I mean, I know for sure that Terry would love to be playing more minutes, but there's a lot of guys on the team that would be loving to play more minutes. But I feel like I have a relationship with Terry that he would come to me and talk to me, and or Brad, you know, if he was really frustrated about a situation, and none of that's happened.
Ainge went on to further clarify that this was all made perfectly clear, as I said earlier, and we've all said a bunch of times.
We all knew what Terry was coming into. His agent, Terry, us, we've discussed it. We preempted all of this type of thing from happening before the season. But so I don't know where any of this stuff is coming from, and I don't know anything about the 7 teams that are monitoring it and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that just seems sort of stuff that's been made up, or I don't believe any of it, put it that way.
So no teams have called you about Terry Rozier?
Not since the season started, no.
Well, let's bring in Mark Murphy. He has covered the C's and the NBA for the Boston Herald for 30 years now. He is the guy who was the most dialed in on everything Marcus Smart this offseason. So, Mark, you were there for Terry Rozier's comments. What was your takeaway? I mean, he said all the right things, as he generally does, but body language, did that suggest anything else? What'd you come away feeling?
It's hard to read body language. I think his role has influenced him a little bit. I mean, you know, before all this stuff happened, I had thought to myself, well, Terry may not necessarily be all that happy with what he's doing, but his point is, you know, you always want to start. You always, and I think that's something that he's placed a greater importance on. You saw what it did for him last year. I mean, some guys just thrive when they're in that role, and I think he's one of them. But he's drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak. He's not going to rock the boat about this stuff. But, and I think it has affected his play, and that's an adjustment he's going through.
Do you believe that he is unhappy, that he does want out, even though he claims he hasn't expressed that?
No, I don't think so. I don't, is he unhappy is a relative term. I don't know how to define that. I mean, like I said, does he wish he had a more prominent role? Absolutely. But he understands, and he's, when they were cleaning out their lockers last season, he was saying that, Kyrie's coming back and it's Kyrie's team. But, Terry wants to be a star. I think he feels he can be.
Currently, and there's obviously only so many minutes to go around, and from a distribution standpoint, beyond minutes, the stats are going to follow one way or the other, and his points, assists, shots, they're all around half of what they were when he started last year, which makes sense. He was playing significantly more. But do you think in that, as you said, he's kind of trying to find his way? Is he having trouble finding his role and fit? Because honestly, it seems like Marcus Morris might be the only guy who's not struggling with that right now, and he was the first one after last season ended to actually question his fit on the team.
Yeah, and Marcus really embraced it. I mean, Marcus went back this, I talked to him the other day. He went back this summer. He watched film. He identified that he had to become a better three-point shooter, and you see the result now. I mean, he's shooting well over 40%. His two-point percentage is second best on the team behind Horford. He's found a way to make himself needed. But, with Terry, it's going to be tougher to be in that role because he's got who ahead of him. But I think, and Terry, one thing Terry said, Brad Stevens told him, you're pressing. I want you to relax a little bit and stop pressing so much. And he admits that he's been doing it. And I think that might be part of what you see in terms of the guy who doesn't look happy is the guy who's pressing to try and find his shot.
Well, Rozier has said going back to the preseason that whatever his role, he just wants to impact the game. Is he someone that, and you touched on this a little bit already, but is he someone that you think has to start, has to play 33, 35 minutes a game as opposed to 22 in order to do that?
I've always thought that about him, yeah. I mean, it was obvious, and it was obvious when he did get the opportunity to start last year that he would just talk about how great it was, how he really wants that stage. He does want to shine. And, all that stuff with Bledsoe during the playoffs. I mean, he just feeds up that kind of stuff. And you're much better at that if you're a starter. But I think it does influence his game. I think when he comes off the bench, he's not – you would think from the way he plays that he might be more of a microwave kind of guy. But I don't think he's really that.
Was the offseason the best time to move Rozier in terms of getting the best value for him, if, in fact, at some point in time they are looking to move him and they're not looking to just play this out and see what happens as a restricted free agent?
There probably would have been a market for him, but, you can understand with Kyrie that you've got to see how he comes back. I mean, they would have been perfectly happy starting Rozier, but, you've got to see how Kyrie's health is. And now you've got to see... it's great that he said he wants to re-sign here, but, you need that signature.
We'll get right back to Mark. I want to tell you, though, today's show brought to you by LinkedIn. The right hire can make a huge impact on your business. That's why it's so important to find the right person. But where do you find that individual? You can try posting on the job boards, but can you really be sure the right person sees your job? Instead, find the right person who will help you grow your business with LinkedIn. As the world's largest professional network, people go to LinkedIn every day to grow professionally and discover job opportunities. 70% of the U.S. workforce is already there, so why not bring your job to them? Seems like a no-brainer, right? I'm there. You should be too. LinkedIn Jobs matches people to your role based on more of who they really are, their skills, interests, even how open they are to new opportunities. This way, your job gets seen by more of the right people. Hiring the right people can feel impossible. Ask anyone who runs a company how hard it is to find good help growing your business, and nobody is more fit to help you than LinkedIn. LinkedIn's been helping people make connections for years. Now LinkedIn wants to flip the script, so to speak. So hurry now to linkedin.com/Celtics and get $50 off your first job post. That's linkedin.com/Celtics to get $50 off your first job post. LinkedIn.com/Celtics. Terms and conditions apply. Let's get back to the show. That's one of the things that I was going to ask you about, too, is, Kyrie Irving, like it or not, has to enter into this conversation because there's still, even despite everything that he has said, and he has been emphatic, over the moon about his love for Boston. It seems like a different interview, whether recorded in the past or current, is dropping every single day. There are still some whispers, Mark, from people who are waiting for Irving to just kind of change his mind and bolt next summer, despite all of that.
Most of those whispers, by the way, are coming out of New York.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah.
Well, what percentage would you put on the chances that Irving does leave, since it does enter this Rozier discussion?
That Irving leaves, I'll put it at 10%.
So you think it's still?
I'm pretty certain he's going to sign. I mean, and I just say that because things can change. I mean, no, I think Kyrie's coming back. I take him at his word on that stuff. He's really gone out on the ledge and committed himself. So
it'd be a hell of a thing to walk back. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, although that's happened before, you never know. The team may not be as good as they thought they were. He may get a little disillusioned.
One of the things that I can't help but think about, and it's just because thinking about Danny Ainge, who you know far better than I do, clearly, just how shrewd a GM he is and what we've observed over the years, he typically is not one to let a guy that he likes walk for nothing in return. And that is what he's facing with Rozier as an RFA, unless, of course, they worked out some sort of a sign-and-trade deal.
Exactly.
Is that something that he's always a few steps ahead, at least? He's always thinking about the future, but he recognizes, I know, because he's talked about it, the fact that they're in kind of a funny window right now in that, on the one hand, they still got to compete with the Warriors, who most assume, and they're probably right, are going to go ahead and win this championship. But if the Celtics are there, anything can happen. We know that. But in terms of this depth, this roster, the contracts they have with the younger guys right now, having Rozier, having Morris, Tatum and Brown being more affordable than they will be a couple of years from now, it's almost like this year is exceedingly important to the point where it's hard to envision, despite Bill Simmons saying, I think Celtics are moving Rozier soon, it's tough to picture a situation where Ainge looks at it and says, well, whatever. I mean, draft picks are good for us down the road, and that'll be helpful because you're not punting on a championship, but you're moving a very, very important piece.
Yes, absolutely. And he's very important insurance, as we've already talked about. You've also got to see, if you're looking at the overall trade picture, I mean, you've got to see how that Sacramento pick is going to pan out. That most people believe that the Kings will be right back where they thought they would be, and that the start that they've had is a little bit of fool's gold. But he's going to have all these assets. I mean, you've got Morris on an expiring contract. They got a lot of pieces, but Morris has made himself so important. I mean, it's amazing how he's made himself needed around here.
Oh, he's been absolutely terrific.
Yeah. Well, and I think Terry will come around too. But I think they're recognizing this guy has to start. To your point, I mean that is obviously better for Terry. That's part of his game. He has to be in a starting role.
Let's play the game just for fun because I know it's what everybody on my Twitter feed wonders constantly. What's a reasonable, realistic return for Rozier if, in fact, the Celtics were to try and move him during this season at some point?
Well, I think he's a very important part of a package for Anthony Davis.
Well, but you can't even do that one until Kyrie Irving has a new deal because of that Rose rule.
Exactly.
So that's not even on the table until next summer.
Right. But maybe that's where it is, you know? I mean, he's a restricted free agent next summer. And, yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think Terry is going to be traded immediately. You know, I think he is a long-term prospect if you're looking for a deal.
Can you, I don't know, envision a situation, whatever it is, that maybe the team is not playing as well as it hopes to, although that's a curious one because it makes Rozier even more important. I'm trying to picture a situation where right around the trade deadline it might make sense for Danny to move Terry Rozier, and it's hard to find that.
It is. I mean, and I think Kyrie's health, and Kyrie has never played a full season.
Right.
I think Kyrie's health is a big asterisk there. I mean, we're very early in the season. I just don't think they're going to trade him on a lark.
Well, and like you said too, in terms of him being Irving insurance, you're not going to find that on the trade market. You're not going to find a guy who can come in and do what Terry does in the event that something did happen to Kyrie.
Right. Terry can come in. He can score. He's a terrific rebounder. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff. He's kind of a unique player.
Well, just for fun, let's flip the script. Do you see a scenario where the Celtics re-sign Rozier and trade Marcus Smart once they have that ability?
Sure, I can see that because with Danny, anybody is trade fodder. I mean, that's what got him into trouble with Ray Allen. Ray was tired of Danny using him as bait every year. And finally, when Danny said, we'll give you a no-trade clause, Ray said, no, I'm going to Miami. So, you know, that's just who Danny is. You know, this is the guy when he was a player who couldn't believe they didn't trade Bird and McHale.
Right. But doesn't it go back to that whole debate discussion that you and I have probably had in the past? I know I've had it on a billion of these shows, at least did during the offseason, of who's more important, Terry Rozier or Marcus Smart, for what you're looking to do as, you know, defensive identity first, the fact that if you have Irving, you know, Smart gives you something that Irving doesn't, vice versa. So Rozier, there's a little bit of redundancy to Irving, which is all well and good if Irving gets hurt. But if in a perfect world he's healthy, it further complicates that debate, obviously. Yeah,
I'm a Smart guy. I mean, always have been. You know, they started him in place of Tatum, and immediately the defensive energy changed. You know, he's if anything, he's shooting worse than he ever has, you know, but he changes games. I mean, Stevens loved it. But what he said was, you know, when you need toughness, where else do you turn? Well, one guy who's been particularly soft, unfortunately, and a lot of that is just sort of getting comfortable and working his way back, and you know where I'm going with this. We'll get off of Rozier. Let's talk about Gordon Hayward, because it shouldn't surprise anyone, but he has been very up and down in his first action after missing a year, and more down than up to many, and I know there are a lot of people out there that are concerned about that. Personally, and I've said this a lot, I never thought he'd be overly impactful out of the gate. I've been kind of a wait till February type of person to see where Gordon is, what he looks like as far as evaluating his role in this team. But looking at it sort of in a vacuum where we are, is this where you thought he would be, or is he behind? No, I don't think he's behind. I mean, you know, as I believe Paul George told him, as Paul George has told other people, and, you know, his injury was actually worse than Hayward because he broke both bones in his leg. But, you know, it takes a year. You know, Gordon is still trying to find a rhythm. I mean, he's rimming out his shots. I mean, I think his shot is very close to falling. That part of his game I don't think is going to be a problem. The rest of it is just learning his teammates and chemistry. You know, he'll move the ball better as he gets more used to these guys. You know, but he's a facilitator, so what you're going to hear a lot is sort of the same criticisms that you've always heard in Forford, which is, you know, well, we should be getting more stats for our buck, you know. He's not going to be a big stat guy this year. Well, and Brad was even going back to still preseason or off-season, there was that cautionary tale. I don't remember who it was with, but he did an interview, and
and he referred to Gordon as the the wing Al Horford, which I think made a lot of people nervous. So wait a minute, you're giving out 2 max contracts to guys that don't fill out the stat sheet, and that's the thing though, when you have that many talented players on one roster and all the depth that we fawn over with this team, you can only have one Kyrie Irving really. But then I guess people look at the Warriors and see the stats that Steph puts up, that KD puts up, that Thompson puts up, that Draymond still finds a way to put up, and says, well, why can't they do it here?
Right. They're still trying to figure that part out. It's Hayward's almost playing more of a guard position, which is really interesting. I mean, he was like a swing forward in Utah, but he's more and more out of the wing. But what has to come along with that is his burst. He doesn't have his burst yet.
True.
If he ever gets it back, So, I mean, that's part of what I honestly believe. It takes a year for someone to come back from an injury like that.
One more quick break to tell you today's show brought to you by The Athletic. If you haven't heard about The Athletic by now, you must be living under a rock. These guys have been crushing every element of sports coverage imaginable. Whether you're looking for specific local coverage with beat guys, sports discussed under a national lens, or anything in between, you got to make sure you take a look at The Athletic. No pop-ups, no ads, just high-quality content waiting behind every single click. The Celtics beat, I don't mean this show, I mean their Celtics beat. It's stacked with great writers. Jay King just wrote a great piece about Marcus Smart and how he's handling an emotional year. Jared Weiss used to work for CLNS. He's sometimes on this podcast. Absolutely stacked coverage. You cannot get content like this anywhere else. 600 to 750 new articles a week. Who else is pushing out quality content like that? If you haven't signed up yet, take advantage of this deal because it's not going to last forever. Go to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat to get 40% off your monthly subscription. That's a subscription for less than $3 a month just by going to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. Jay King, Jared Weiss, Sam Amick, Shams Charania, list goes on, and more, all for less than $3 a month. Are you kidding me? Sign me up, and sign yourself up too at theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. Back to the show. People should remember too, you bring up the guard aspect, and it's true, which is unique, is different from what he's done in the past, and it directly impacts, or at least indirectly impacts, Terry Rozier, because it's not just Irving or Smart that he's competing with minutes for in that backcourt, or Jalen when he's there. He's competing with Hayward as well. And so in many ways, he should be fortunate to even be at about 23 minutes a game.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of these troubles continue if he juggles the starting lineup. They clearly weren't happy with Tatum.
And he had such a hot start in those first few or handful of games of the year, too. What's happened since then, do you think?
He might be pressing. I talked to him the other day. I asked him, how are people treating you differently this year? And he said, well, they're not leaving me open anymore. So he's dealing with that.
Yeah.
It's, he's proven. Now he has to learn to basically score against that kind of defense. But he's also, I don't think he's been very good defensively this year.
No, terrible. Terrible on both ends of the floor in Phoenix, but beyond that, in general, the defense has taken a step back. And that was, people were so surprised last year when he was a rookie that he played as well as he did defensively, because that was not his reputation coming out of college. And then, sort of back to where he was, I guess.
Yeah, so, but, Jalen's not off to a good start. He's getting there. I mean, he's got a lot on his plate because he's taking the big scorer every night.
Well, getting back to Hayward, let's remove the respect or prestige element and just examine the results or reality of where we are. And it was a question going into the year, and a lot of people kind of laughed at it, but now it's coming up again. Should Hayward be starting right now?
I thought, actually, I had that thought last night. I mean, I think that if Stevens decides to juggle the lineup, he's the most likely one to go back to the bench. But then there's a little more duplication there with Morris. I mean, Morris, he might actually be a good fit with Morris because of his passing ability. Mm-hmm. And then that second unit will really spread the floor if you have those two out there.
Right, and Rozier as well. So you alluded to this, especially when it comes to juggling that lineup. How concerned are you with the team's disjointed offense, regularly poor shooting performances? We know it's early in the season, but if this goes on another couple months, it becomes tougher to defend. It becomes a part of your identity.
Yeah, and Kyrie had to pull a 39-point game out of his butt, right?
Yeah,
it's just they're too reliant on Kyrie still, so it's going to take time. It's a chemistry thing. I mean, Horford will never be a guy you depend on for scoring.
You're on the move, but I appreciate you taking time, getting a lot of good insights on what's going on, especially this Terry Rozier situation. We'll see how things play out because there's a lot going on, a lot of questions to be answered, and people, once the wins start to follow, people will settle down. Yeah,
and this is a brutal road trip.
Yeah.
Phoenix, who they could barely beat the softie on the list. They've got Portland. It's been an interesting schedule so far. They've never had a long. Most people think this is the longest road trip they can remember in a while, but they've. It's a little bit of a different. They're sort of been being thrown into the fire with this schedule, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, Mark Murphy of the Boston Herald, don't want to keep you, but appreciate you hopping on. We'll definitely do it again soon. It's always fun.
All right, Adam, thanks.
Great stuff from Mark, as usual. Always enjoy talking to him. As I said to him, we'll definitely do it again as the season moves along because he is tapped in. We always talk about those guys, he and Steve Bulpett, who have been at the Herald and have been on the beat, covering the league, covering this team for decades, and have that direct line into Danny Ainge. They know things, and that's what we want to bring to this show here. I asked you guys to submit questions on Twitter. You gave me a whole bunch of them. I had planned on getting some of them to Mark for his input. Unfortunately, we didn't quite have time for that, but I will give you some of my impressions anyway. As far as Vinny, question here regarding the crowded lineup and abundance of depth. Is there an argument to be made that this Celtics team can improve by making an addition by subtraction? I guess we kind of hit on that a little bit with Mark. I just think that a lot of this was expected. And I don't mean the poor shooting performances or sometimes questioning effort or intensity and does the team, occasionally take a night off, that type of thing. I just mean examining the depth, how many mouths there are to feed. We talk about that in football all the time. The receivers and crowded offense, guys got to eat. Same type of thing, same type of mentality, and hell, half this show at least was about Terry Rozier and his situation, be it true or and we're being lied to or false from Bill Simmons, whatever the case. Of course, guys want to play more. Whether they're unhappy, quote unquote, or not is another thing. I don't think you move a guy just to try and thin out your roster, and so you have more of a clear top 9 as opposed to top 10 or top 11, that type of thing. Depth's a good thing. Depth is always a good thing. It is a strength, and Boston is as deep as any team in the NBA. Especially, right now, you're starting to see it a little bit, like Aaron Baines has been down. Daniel Tice has been down. It puts more pressure on Al Horford. It's given Robert Williams a little bit of an opportunity. God forbid something should happen to Kyrie Irving and or Gordon Hayward again. You're going to all of a sudden be right back where they were last year and saying, boy, this depth is a good thing. It's a good thing we have these guys. So I don't think, especially this early, Danny Ainge, historically, I don't believe has ever made a trade this early in the season. Definitely not one of significance. So you don't do it just to do it and hope that it improves things. You hope that your lineup starts to gel and figure it out and guys get on the same page a little bit. So to that same end, a question from Mr. Vincenzi. Will the Celtics attempt to get under the luxury tax this season with the future repeater tax looming? They have shown no sign of that whatsoever. They seem very happy, very content with the roster, and borderline eager to pay when it comes time, as long as they have the right bodies and the right guys in the mix that they're excited about. And I think that holds true, at least as we talk right now. From Boomer, who's underperformed the most this season, who has exceeded expectations? Well, I think the clear exceeded expectations is Marcus Morris and what he has done in a role that was coming into the year from his mouth very unclear. Wasn't sure where he fit in with guys coming back, Hayward being healthy, and he has arguably been the MVP of this team to this point in the year on a consistent basis in terms of being dependable, being reliable. Remember, as good as Kyrie Irving has been since he got a haircut, he was not that guy early on this season. Morris really has been out of the gate. He's had like one bad game so far or iffy game so far. So I think he would be your guy right there. As far as underperforming, I mean, unfortunately, there are a lot of candidates. Horford, and this taps into Antonio's question, what's going on with Al Horford shooting? Not just threes, is he missing a lot of shots this year than he normally hits? It's hurting the offense. Well, Al Horford is shooting as poorly as he ever has in his career, period. From the field, Mark touted the 2-point percentage, whatever the hell it is with Horford, but it's on the whole, he has not been what he was last year or even the year before that when some people who don't pay as close attention were a little frustrated with his performances. So I can only imagine how those guys feel right now in looking at him. It has not been pretty. I think he, for what you need him to be for this team, would probably be number one. I know some people hear that question might instantly be thinking Jason Tatum. I don't think Tatum is the guy who's underperformed the most this season because my expectations for him coming into this year weren't what most people's were. You know, I didn't think he was going to average 20 points or even 18 points. I figured he's going to fit in. And, yeah, you'd like to see him shoot better, again, overall, and from three, and be more like he was last year on both ends of the floor, have more of that defense. Jaylen Brown entered that conversation for underperformances the first long stretch of the season, save for the last few games. He's improved at this point. But, you know, Tatum, I just think that numbers-wise, this is around what he's going to be this year. The guy's going to average 15, 16 points. He may give you a couple more rebounds than he did as a rookie. To me, it's Horford. All right, that's about all the time we have. Appreciate the questions. We'll try and get even more of them in next week. It's good to be back after a couple-week absence. Apologize for that. I was in full baseball mode, traveling around covering the Red Sox. Humble brag, right? It was a good time. Hopefully you saw some of the CLNS videos I did with Trags out there at the World Series and at Fenway and all that stuff. But for those of you dialed in, devoted to the Celtics, which I imagine is all of you because you're listening to Celtics Beat, we will be back in with full steam ahead going forward. It's going to be a good time as this team starts to really ramp up. Once again, today's show brought to you by LinkedIn. Hurry now to linkedin.com/Celtics. Receive $50 off your first job post. That's linkedin.com/Celtics to get $50 off your first job post. Today's show also brought to you by The Athletic. Go to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat to get 40% off your monthly subscription. That's a subscription for less than $3 a month just by going to theathletic.com/CelticsBeat. Thanks to my producer, Evan Valenti. Of course, thanks to Mark Murphy once again, to Nick, to Larry, to John, everybody at CLNS Media. And as I always say, thanks mostly to you. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you're just checking us out for the first time on Twitter or something like that, you can go to iTunes, subscribe to Celtics Beat, search, leave a comment. 5-star ratings always appreciated. You can find us and subscribe on Stitcher. We're everywhere because so are the Celtics. That's what happens when you're good. Play us out, Gene.